Okay, welcome back once again to the Prepper's Pantry with your host, the stateless cook, Michael of Barbary. It's yours truly. So, got something a little bit different for you this time around. It's not going to be our normal Prepper's Pantry where I'm going to show you how to make something out of your pantry. I'm going to show you how to make something to put into your pantry. Okay? So, that's why our different title here today. This is going to be Prepper's Pantry Putting Things Aside, episode 1. So in this one, we're going to be making some raspberry jam to be putting into the pantry to store. Now, one thing I want to say before I get started, anything else, for all of these episodes where we're going to be putting things aside in the pantry, instead of taking them out to make things, I want to emphasize caution on your part while we're doing this. All right? Canning is a thing that's been around for a long time in the home. A couple hundred years, I think. It's relatively new, relatively speaking to the rest of human history. But it's newish, but it's still a couple hundred years old, and we've learned a lot. But that said, if you are not careful, not only could you possibly make yourself sick, you could very easily potentially kill yourself. Botulism, not something to joke around with here, okay? So, with that said, do be careful. Exercise caution whenever you're canning anything. High pH, high heat, or both. One of those two things is something that you want to do to make sure you kill off that bacteria that causes botulism. Botulism, for those who are uninitiated, the toxin that the bacteria produce during their life cycle is a paralytic. So if you get high enough doses of it, it will make it to where you can't breathe, to where your heart can't beat, and that's it. That's all she wrote. Okay? So I'm not going to bore you with all the other details. Just do be careful anytime you're canning anything. Okay? So, that said, very first episode for putting things aside here, as I mentioned, we're going to be making some raspberry jam. A friend of my mother's has beautiful set of raspberry bushes, and she has been so kind as to let us go pick a whole bunch of them. So I'm taking some of them today. We're going to turn them into jam. There's going to be another time a little bit later because as of filming this, I've got at least one more time where I'm going out to pick. That's tomorrow, in fact. And there's going to be an episode where I'm going to be turning some of that into some wine. That ought to be fun. I've never done it before. So it's going to be an experience for all of us. Maybe it'll be a good one. I hope it will. Maybe it'll be a shitty one. I hope it isn't. But either way, today, jam. Let's get to it. Not going to waste your time with this any other bullshit. Alright? Let's get to making some jam. Alright, so our tools that we're going to need for all of this, and I think I forgot one of them someplace, so I'll have to get that to show you a little bit later. Pretty simple. Going to need canning jars. I'm using 1 cup ball canning jars. Okay? In ball canning jars, take a 2-piece lid. Something most of you have probably seen. So this is the actual lid that vacuum seals, and then the ring to tighten on. Okay? Now, through the process of canning, you don't need to sterilize these ahead of time, especially since we're going to be making some jam. Okay? One of the beauties of jam making, jelly, any of that kind of thing, which is why we can do, well, I'm going to rewind here a little bit. Okay, this piece of equipment, just a 2-part water bath, okay? You don't want heat directly on the bottom of your jars. That could cause them to burst. So this is a double pan. This part, see, there you go. It's got holes in it so that the water from the pan below it can get into it, but so the heat from the burner isn't directly on the bottom of the jars. That can cause damage to the jars, can cause them to weaken, can cause them to break easier, etc., etc. So you don't want it directly on. You either want a 2-part thing like this, or there are stands that you can drop into a canning pot that you rest your jars on top of. It's basically like a wire cooling rack, but it's designed for a pot. Okay? So when you're doing home canning, you're doing one of two ways. Either a hot water bath like this, which I've just got the heat on it because we want it to come up to a boil before we put anything in here. And given that it's a big pot of water, it's going to take a little while. Okay, or you're going to use a pressure canner. Okay, hot water bath, generally speaking. Now, I'm going to go ahead and backtrack on something I said a minute ago about being real careful. You can can anything you want in here. You shouldn't can anything you want in here. Okay, this is for high pH items, so things that are very acidic. Any homemade pickles or sauerkraut or stuff like that you want to vacuum seal. After you get them, you put them in the jar, you drop them in the hot water bath, the boiling hot water bath. Let it go for 10-15 minutes so everything gets heated through real well. Then you pull them out, the heat will vacuum seal it, away you go. So things like that, anything with tomatoes, anything else that's been acidified, lemons, etc., whatever, something that's very acidic, or things that naturally get very high heat, like the jams that we're going to be making, jams, jellies, etc. So, for those who don't know, we're going to go do a real brief science lesson here, okay? Everything boils at different temperatures. Okay, water, as we're used to, boils at 212 degrees Fahrenheit, 100 degrees Celsius at sea level on Earth. Okay, so that's under standard pressure, 212 degrees. Once it hits that temperature, it changes from a liquid to a gaseous state. That requires a ton of energy, so the water that changes into a gas pulls just tons of heat out of the rest of the liquid water so it can turn into a gas and vaporize and fly away. Okay, so that's why you reach an equilibrium of 212 degrees Fahrenheit. All right. Now, as you put pressure on it, that makes the gas stay in liquid water, which means you can continue to pump more heat into it. That's why a pressure canner works for things that aren't very acidic. Okay? The acid is another thing that'll kill off the botulism that I mentioned a few minutes ago. All right? Now, when you're doing things like jams and jellies, though, you can still do it in here because there's so much sugar in your jam and your jelly that they're going to just get way hotter than the boiling water anyway. They'll just continue to soak in that heat energy. If you've ever made homemade candies, that's how that works. You continue to cook the sugar and they can get 500-600 degrees if you let them. Before they, well, maybe not quite that hot, but certainly like 300 or 400. I don't remember the exact candying temperatures. Point of the matter being is it gets way above the temperature that botulism can survive at. So you drop them into the boiling water for 10 minutes, especially since we're going to be putting the hot jam right into these jars anyway, which these jars are going to need to be warmed up a little bit before we put our hot jam into there. But that's okay. We'll get to that in a minute. Actually, what we can do, I'm just going to move our jars right next to our hot water bath so they can kind of absorb some radiant heat, because we don't want them cold when we put our jam in, because otherwise there's a chance that they can break. So we want them warm. They don't have to be hot, but we want them warm. Okay, so we're just going to put them right there to warm up. But so anyway, jams, jellies, that type of preserves, etc. The sugars are going to make them get so much hotter than a normal canning thing would. You can drop them right into the hot water bath just to do that last little bit of killing things off. You're good to go. Okay. Now, used to be that people would always tell you sterilize your jars, all that kind of crap before you do anything. If you're using a boiling hot water bath or pressure canning it, and you're going to make sure everything's in there for at least like 10 minutes, you don't need to sterilize ahead of time. Probably don't even really need to sterilize if you're going to put it in less time, especially with something like a jam that's going to go in nice and hot anyway. So we're not going to worry about that. All right, so now we're going to get started. These are my raspberries, freshly picked, I don't remember, maybe a week ago. Not terribly long ago. So I just stuck them in the freezer on sheet trays to freeze, and then put them in the bags like this so that they wouldn't spoil between now and, or when I picked them and now. So what I'm going to do is just drop in 5 cups of our whole berries here. And I've kind of already gone through and picked out stems and leaves and shit like that, so we're going to just drop those in. You know what, I don't have very many left of these. We're going to just do a little bit more anyway. Screw it. It's not going to hurt anything. Probably about 3/4 of a cup. So, you know, I need to increase my sugar a little bit, but that's fine. Okay, now, since these are frozen, these are going to take a couple of minutes. So we're going to turn this on kind of medium-high-ish. We're going to let those start cooking down, come to a boil. We'll be back in a few minutes. Don't go anywhere. Okay. So here we are. We're getting there. You can see my frozen and previously whole raspberries are turning into raspberry-like mush, which is what we want. I'm going to go ahead and turn the heat up a little bit so we can speed this process up a little bit. Now you'll notice I'm moving the canning jars back over near our hot water bath. That's because, well, we were waiting for things to go on and I had the camera off there for a minute. My pot, apparently, that's much hotter than I thought it was going to be, was a little full, so it started boiling over a little bit, which happens, not a big deal. So I had to turn the heat off and kind of soaked up the water that was spilling over. We're going to just kind of turn the heat back on low, well, not low, medium underneath our hot water bath. Now, for our jam here, a lot of times you might actually start with these already mashed up and not frozen. So we want to make sure that this gets good and broken down. You can just see I'm just using a spatula to stir with as they cook. They break down real nicely on their own as it is. Okay. So there's just a whole bunch of white sugar over there. One of the last things I wanted to show real quick. This is the tool that I mentioned I didn't have at the beginning. It's to remove our jars from the hot water bath because, you know, you're not going to want to reach in there with your bare hand, what with the boiling water and everything. Okay? So, I need a measuring cup. My other measuring cup has a bunch of raspberry gunk in it, so we're not going to want to use that. Alright, so we've gotten, see, turn the heat back on. Hear that sputtering noise? That's the water boiling over in this again. I apparently need to take some water out of it. So we're going to do that real quick. That needs to boil now for a few minutes. So one of the things that we're going to be doing here, which is unusual, but not unheard of, is I am not going to be adding, just taking some water out here, I'm not going to be adding pectin to our jam. Okay? We're going with kind of a, I guess you can call it a rustic style if you want to. It doesn't really matter. Whatever you want to call it. Point of the matter being is, I'm not adding pectin. So, for this to work properly, we need the sugars to kind of cook almost like we're making candy. Almost. It's not quite the same. Well, it actually is kind of. But not quite. Okay? So one of the things we're going to be doing with it as well, as you see the bottle over here, I'm cheating because I'm a dirty cheater like that. A little bit of the old real lemon. It's not very lemony, but, you know, it serves my purposes. So when we add our sugar here in a minute, after this is boiled some, evaporated out a little bit of that water, and we've started the process of cooking the sugars that are already naturally present. Okay. Oh, are you still a little full? We'll find out. Anyway, so I can talk. So the acid, lemon juice in this case, you can use all kinds of different acids to do the same thing, is going to do what's called invert the sugars. You don't need a lot to do this, but you do need a little bit. So what that does basically is it's kind of the same process as making a caramel sauce. You know how you can make caramel and sugar gets this nice dark caramel color, and but yet it doesn't turn into a brick like a hard candy would. It's taking a little more water out. Well, that is because of the inversion. I don't remember off the top of my head what exactly happens chemically, but the point of the matter being is the acid changes the way the sugars react to heat. So they tend to thicken a little bit more than harden. Okay? So, got our raspberries. Been boiling now for a few minutes. So what we're going to do now is turn it into jam. Turn it into our real jam. What does that mean? It means adding a crap load of sugar. 4 cups is what we're going to go with. Okay, so like I said, a crap load of sugar. That is a very technical amount, crap load. All right, and then we're going to add a tablespoon and roughly a half of lemon juice to the whole shebang. We're going to stir this all in real nice. Make sure our sugar gets good and dissolved throughout the whole thing. I think I might end up needing another canning jar. Maybe not. We'll see. We'll see. I don't know. Okay. I can still kind of feel... Ooh. I don't know how well you saw that splash up onto my finger. You're going to want to be careful as this starts to cook, because it is going to get wicked hot very soon. So, at any rate, as I'm stirring here, I can kind of feel a little bit of the grittiness from the sugar still in the bottom. So that's why I'm just going to kind of keep stirring for a little bit here until it's a little bit more dissolved, and that is really annoying me. It's not that it's a huge deal that there's some water bubbling over. It's just the sound irritates the crap out of me, especially while I'm trying to talk to you guys here. You know, there's enough noise going on. We don't need all that shit too. Alright, so we're going to let that kind of feels like most of the sugar is dissolved now, so we're going to just let that go. I'm going to let this come up to a boil. That'll take a couple minutes. We'll turn the heat up just a touch. I'm going to let that come up to a boil, and then it needs to boil for 5 minutes. Okay, because again, we want the sugars to do the things the sugars do throughout the cooking process and start to form their own gels. Okay, and then normally, if you're doing it the more modern way with the pectin, if I remember correctly, because I personally have never actually made jams with pectin. I've always just used sugars and inversions as the thickening process for it. So that's one of the things I'm going to have to show you guys later. Bacon jam. Bacon jam is a thing of beauty. If you've never had it, I'm going to show you one. Not today. Another time. But hold me to it. Okay? So anyway, I believe the pectin is added after the boiling process with the sugars and so forth. Okay? Don't quote me on that. Like I said, I have never actually made jam that way. Even though it's supposedly the right way. Bullcrap. It's not the right way. The right way is the way that you like it. I like it this way. This is the way we're going to do it. See what happens. Yeah? So, start. I don't know how well you can see that. Let's bring that in a little closer so you can see it a little bit better. You can kind of start seeing some movement here. We're going to let that come up to a good boil. And we're going to let that go for a few minutes. So I'll see you in about 5 minutes. All right. It's been 5 minutes. As you can see, it's come up to quite the boil, which is what we were looking for. So during the boiling, it's going to evaporate out some of the water, because the water's still going to evaporate just like it would normally. Yeah, it's going to pull some heat out, but you're continuing to pump more and more heat in, so the sugars are going to continue to get hotter and hotter and hotter and hotter and hotter, like they do. As you can see, just from it kind of running off my spatula here. Let me get that a little closer, okay? Like you can kind of see the consistency. It looks kind of like a sauce right now. There is no form whatsoever of any kind of thickening in here other than the natural thickening that occurs as you cook sugars. Okay, you can see that, and it's hot as hell. I don't know how hot it is exactly, but it's going to be hot. Now, because we're using some fresh raspberries here, and because I didn't mash them up prior, I'm actually going to let this just cook just a touch bit more. Not a ton, because I don't want it to get overcooked and get too crazy. But yeah, I think we're going to be good. So now, putting this nitrile glove on, not because I'm worried about sanitation or something like that, but because while I'm filling these jars, if I happen to drip some of this stuff onto my hand, I can just put the jar down and rip this glove off and hopefully avoid burning myself quite so badly. So, that's why I got the glove on, if that seems real weird. Because I'll be honest, it is a little weird. Alright, so we should probably actually pull this off of our hot burner here, because it's going to be plenty hot enough as it is. Sugars are going to continue to cook. The sugars are also going to cook once we get them in our hot water bath. Okay, now to avoid making a giant mess, this is also why I have the glove, because I'm trying to avoid making a huge mess, but I also want to avoid burning the ever-living shit out of myself. Okay, so want just a little bit more. Kind of, as you see your jars, this bottom ring here, kind of a good fill mark, generally speaking. Maybe a little bit more. Let me see how full this is. We'll start with that, because I mean, a little bit of room in top is fine. You don't want a ton, because the more air that gets in there, the easier it is for bacteria to take hold anyway. But you want a little bit so you got room for the lid, the actual lid itself to vacuum seal in. So you need a little bit of headspace, but you don't want a ton of it. So we're gonna just start with that bottom ring area basically on each of the jars. Plus that also gives us a good even amount in our jars. That was a little cool, so I'm actually going to put it over on a different side to warm up a little bit more. Again, you want your jars warmed up before you put this in here, because this is very hot, and glass is glass, and very rapid and sudden temperature changes can cause glass to become very fragile. Okay? So this one is actually even cooler. Yeah, this jar is a little bit warmer, so we're going to go with this one next. Okay. We're getting down towards the bottom, so getting a little more difficult to scoop up and fill in. If I actually have enough in here for this fifth jar. Looks like I will. Looks like I will. Okay. It's going to be awfully close, though. I don't know how well you can see it as I'm pouring in, but even just a little bit, it started to cool now. Of course, of taking it off the burner and filling these jars, this jam's already thickening, so not a ton, obviously, because it's still pretty freaking hot, but, you know, some. So this is a good sign. It's a good sign that we're getting what we wanted to get out of it. And it is, of course, sticky as hell, because, you know, there's a whole buttload of sugar in it. Okay, so, now, ooh, that's hot. It's real weird. Right, it's been soaking up boiling water, literally sitting on a burner. It's a little warm. Okay, so now I want to make sure our rims especially are clean. Okay, these jars have gotten very hot now that this jam is in it. So be careful while you're handling the jars as well, because one of the benefits of being a professional cook for as long as I have, I say benefits kind of with some air quotes, is I don't have as much heat feelings in the tips of my fingers as I once did. So, I mean, that's kind of nice in that it doesn't hurt. It's kind of bad, though, because the damage is still being caused. But, I mean, it's not so bad that you have to really worry about a lot of damage being caused to your fingers here, but it might hurt a little bit if you're not used to it. So, you know, kind of be careful while you're handling them, okay? Yeah. Hear that sound? That's because it hasn't vacuum sealed yet, okay? This is a good thing. We're fine with that, all right? So you put the lid on, tighten them down. Do not over-tighten them, though, okay? You don't want to crank those things on there, because that can cause damage as well. You want them out. Jesus, that was really hot. See what I mean? Okay, so you want them nice and tight, but you don't want to just crank them on, because that, again, you can start breaking glass that way. We don't want broken glass. We want nice, solid pieces of glass with lots of delicious raspberry gooiness in it. Okay? So now we're going to just very carefully lift each one of these in. Drop them down carefully. Again, we don't want them to break. Okay? So set them down carefully. I definitely have far too much water here, because I've only got 3 of my 5 jars in there, and we're about to overflow. So scoop some of that out. Put this next guy in there. All right. I may have gotten slightly too small of a pot for the number of jars I was going to have. Oh, I don't. Perfect. 5 of them fits beautifully. You want to, when you get your excuse me, when you get your cans in here, jars, whatever, same difference. You want to make sure you've got at least an inch of water over the top. Okay. So you're getting good heat contact to the rest of it. Now, we're going to let this do. You can see how it's not quite the rolling boil it was at one point. Turned our heat back up to about, well, I've got a 7-point heat scale on my stove. It's a 5 right now is what I turned it up to. So medium high-ish. And we're going to let that come back up to a rolling boil. All right, and after it hits that rolling boil mark again, we are going to give it another 5 minutes in there. Make sure we get on the appropriate amount of heat in. Actually, we're probably going to give it a little bit more than 5 minutes. Probably going to give it about 10. And pull those bad boys out. And going to let them cool, but we'll get back to the rest of that in just a minute. Well, more like probably about 10 minutes. So, see you guys in a few. Stop spitting at me. Okay, here we go. It's been 10 minutes now since they've been boiling. So, oops, sorry about the noise. Trying to get cooling rack out. So, we are where we need to be. What we're going to do, we're at the very simple stage here now, okay? The simple stage is, let me bring you over to where we're actually going to be setting this up. And just set that right over here. And let them cool for a while. So we just use our little grabber deal guy here. Very carefully lift them out and let a little bit of the water drop. Okay. And we're just going to set them there. The main reason I'm even using the cooling rack isn't necessarily for the jars so much as it is the counter. Because of course they're quite hot. So I don't want to damage the countertop by setting these hot jars on them. Plus, as hot as they are, and as cool as the counter is, we once again have the problem that I mentioned earlier of potentially getting very rapid, very sudden temperature swings, and then breaking the bottoms of our jars, which we don't want to happen. So we're just going to let them sit there. I really should have put a towel underneath them if I was thinking I would have to catch the water, but I didn't. So I'm going to very carefully do that here in a minute. And we're going to let those cool. Now, as they cool, I'm not going to touch them because you don't want to touch them while they're cooling, okay? You want to just let them do their thing. You can kind of see the buttons and how it's starting, the lids are already starting to kind of pull in a little bit around them. You guys can actually see it a lot clearer than I can for whatever weird reason, but there it is. So eventually, as they cool, those will pull down, it'll vacuum seal, and they'll be good for months, years, easily, as long as the seal stays good, okay? That's the important thing. Once you start noticing rust, signs of damage to the jar, things like that, no good. Or if the buttons don't pop down, they don't seal properly, don't want to do that either. So once again, that's how you get shit like botulism, and then you die. You gonna die. Don't do it. Okay. So we're gonna let those cool for a while. I will see you guys back in a day or two after they've cooled some. We're gonna test it, make sure I didn't screw up. So when you do it at home, you know that if you follow my instructions, you're gonna do things the right way. All right? So until then, as far as the raspberry jam is concerned, that's it. That's all for now. See you in a couple days. Okay, well, here we are. Saturday morning. You can see by my attire, it's been a few days because I'm not wearing the same clothes. 2 days actually since we made the raspberry jam, so that's gonna be plenty of time that if something went wrong, we're gonna notice it by now. So, open up a jar anyway. Hope that it turned out right. You can kind of see already, it's set up very nicely. It's still a little liquidy, slowly starting to move, which it should. Okay, so come on. There we go. Yeah, it definitely sealed up. Doesn't smell off. Don't see any signs of any weird activity happening on top. So we're good there. And look at that. It's nice jellied consistency. It spreads. Let's get the jar out of the way so you can see that. Spreading just fabulously. Now this has been just in a cupboard for the last 2 days. Hasn't been refrigerated. Nothing like that. Just sitting there. So like I said, if something was gonna have gone wrong, it definitely would have by now. Now for the ultimate test. That's really good. That is really good. So, there it is. It's that simple. Making your own jam. This process can be used for any type of fruit that you want to, really. I mean, be it strawberries, blueberries, blackberries, gooseberries, honeyberries. Probably do it with grapes just as easily, too. Grapes might be a little chunky with the skins. That might be a little weird, but probably could do it. So, hope you enjoyed it. You know the deal. Like the video, share the video. I don't care, I'm not your dad. Check out my website. I have a link below. Buy something if you like it. And if you don't, that's cool too. Share the website around. Appreciate everything you guys do. I'm gonna finish eating this piece of toast. Have a great day.